Shameless plug because I'm a bitch like that. Hey guys, I got a new jacket. Pretty cool, huh? Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today I'm talking about Macintosh plus Floral Shoppe. So, vaporwave. Where to even start with this genre? Now, I've gotten a lot of requests over the past couple of years to cover this one for obvious reasons. The genre is a large-scale internet phenomenon that continues to get thousands of new releases every year. So many people taking old obscure 80s tunes, slowing them down, and presenting them as their own material under weird concepts in Japanese. And it all started with this! Now, the main reason it's taken me as long as it has to get to this one is that I always felt like I was kind of living under a rock when it came to this genre. I tried getting into vaporwave near the end of 2015. I had like 10 or 12 albums that caught my interest, and I listened to every now and then, but I still felt like I was only getting a small portion of the picture and didn't feel like I was actually familiar with the genre. Well, that changed over the past couple of days as I downloaded a ton of vaporwave albums to listen to for research purposes, bringing the total amount of vaporwave albums I've heard now from like 15 or so to 60. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure all 60 of the albums I listen to qualify as vaporwave, but I feel like I have a more substantial view of the big picture, and I feel like I can say that I get this genre now. Or maybe I don't, but at this point it's probably just gonna come down to opinions. I feel like I can say for sure what I like and don't like in vaporwave. For instance, this is a genre that often lets its samples carry most of the work. And to be perfectly honest, this fact doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would, as I can usually just enjoy the source material and its presentation. I think so long as you can make your vaporwave sound good, and also sound relatively unique, then you're good to go in my eyes. Artistic integrity is basically an added bonus that helps, but isn't necessarily required. That's what I look for in vaporwave, at least. If I can get immersed in it, then it's working. Like, there are a lot of early releases on the Dream Catalog label that I'm aware are really simplistic, but I don't really think about that when I'm listening to it, like Hong Kong Express's Romantic Dream, Groceries' Yes We're Open, or Vanity's Fantasy. Yes, this genre has much lower standards than most music, but if I can ignore the lower standards, I'm cool with it. I can enjoy it. That being said, there are certain cliches in this genre that have been progressively bothering me more and more as I listen to more vaporwave. And the biggest one is that I have gotten really goddamn sick of pitch-down vocals. I don't hate the sound of pitch-shifted vocals on principle. I can usually handle it, but in the case of vaporwave, all it does is highlight how fundamentally lazy the genre is, and reminds me, oh yeah, the music is letting the sample do the work. And another thing, I also really hate it when people make their music bad on purpose. I've seen this a couple of times, and this is a genre that really only works when it's not self-aware. There's no way for me to get immersed in it when you're specifically highlighting how shallow the genre is. I don't need the reminders, thank you very much. Also, there's a lot of discussion surrounding the aesthetic presentation of vaporwave and how that's often considered more important than the music itself. I personally say if the music's not good, then what's even the point? But I do kinda see where this point of view comes from. As I said, I downloaded 60 albums that just looked interesting to me. The aesthetic was a driving force in what made me check out so many of these albums. The concepts and artwork involved with these albums looked interesting, so I wanted to see if they had the music to back it up. And not all of them did. I'll be honest, it's kind of ironic that many of these albums try to be critiques on modern capitalism because they kind of follow those exact ideals, using alluring and interesting imagery to sell lazy music. Actually, that's probably the entire point, but maybe I just don't get that part. But I digress. I think the imagery involved with an album can help me get interested, but I'm not gonna keep it on my iPod unless it's got the music to back it up. But enough talking about vaporwave in general. This video is still supposed to be a review of the one album that kinda started it all, Floral Shoppe by Macintosh Plus. An album that relies heavily on its aesthetic, that's bad on purpose, that utilizes pitch-down vocals, and combines the sounds of two already released albums that weren't even that great. I always see Chuck Person's Echo Jams Volume 1 and James Ferraro's Far Side Virtual credited as the true progenitors of vaporwave. I've heard them. I don't see myself returning to them all that much. Far Side Virtual probably was the better album as it had actual effort put into it, but it doesn't really connect with me for some reason I couldn't really put my finger on. And as for Echo Jams, I see absolutely no reason to return to this one when Oneohtrix Point Never's replica exists. It's the same artist and is stylistically really similar, but it actually has thought and effort put into it. But the weirdest thing is, despite the fact that Floral Shoppe falls for basically all the same cliches that I've come to really hate in this genre, I still enjoy it for some reason. I've heard some of Macintosh Plus's work under her main alias Vectroid as well. By the way, yes, the mastermind behind this glorious disaster is in fact female, which is pretty cool, and not something you see every day, so I felt like it was worth mentioning. The three Vectroid albums that I heard, being Neo Cali, Color Ocean Road, and Star Calc, were all original material, I think at least, that kinda had similar sounds. Star Calc was by far the best of these three, by the way. But the point is, to Vectroid, Floral Shoppe was probably no more than a stupid joke, in the same way Echo Jams Volume 1 was a joke to Daniel Lopatin. Possibly even more so. So I'm going to try and figure out why I still like Floral Shoppe, but see no reason to return to Echo Jams. I may be off on a lot of these things, but whatever, it is opinion. For one thing, Floral Shoppe is much more iconic and widespread. Lopatin, I think, is better known for being Oneohtrix Point Never than he is for being Chuck Person, but Vectroid is more well known as Macintosh Plus. Floral Shoppe has become such a gigantic phenomenon that it's eclipsed basically all the dumb cliches. When I hear Echo Jams, I hear Lopatin barely fucking around with already released material, some of which I already knew prior to hearing that. That in itself, I think, is probably a big part of that. Like, he used Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty at one point, and that's all I could hear in that one particular track. It sounded shallow, and it felt shallow. Though, to be honest, there were tracks on Echo Jams that I didn't recognize the sample, but felt even more shallow, because it was so obvious what he was doing. And there are other tracks on Echo Jams that didn't feel quite as shallow, but because he was doing a lot more layering and stuff, but I digress. Floral Shoppe also feels shallow, but the sheer popularity and iconicness, if that is even a word, has made it eclipse the songs that it sampled. Like, the fact that I didn't know any of these samples prior to hearing the album was mainly a big part of this. Take It's Your Move by Diana Ross, which is, of course, the sample behind the ever-famous second track on this album. I bet you 95% of the people on the internet know It's Your Move because of Macintosh Plus. Like, from what I can tell, It's Your Move wasn't exactly a big single. It was like a deep cut from an album that wasn't even in what many would consider to be the artist's prime in the 70s, and was probably mainly only known by big Diana Ross fans before that. Granted, I'm not a giant Diana Ross fan myself, so I could have gotten that completely wrong again. But I looked at iTunes at reviews of that one album. One was a Diana Ross fan, and the rest were Vaporwave fans. And of course, the comments on It's Your Move on YouTube are covered in Vaporwave fans. But then again, YouTube comments are always contain giant amounts of stupid, so maybe there's a silent majority, but that's just how it looks from my perspective. But popularity aside, there's still another cliche that's all over Floral Shoppe that I typically hate in this genre, but for some reason don't mind here. Pitch-shifted vocals. For the record, the last two songs on this album, the untitled bonus tracks or whatever, I think are complete garbage and skip over the second they come up. But in the main bulk of the album, there's obviously pitch-shifted vocals in a lot of these tracks, and I think it brings me to one quality of vaporwave that I forgot to mention, but I think is key. I found that almost all vaporwave gets better with repeat listens. I couldn't really tell you why that is, but in this particular case, the fact that I'm really familiar with this album and know the songs better than the samples is probably a big part of that. I think you're always going to gravitate more towards releases that you started with enjoying in this genre. And for most people, including myself, this was the entry point, and therefore we all know it and enjoy it more because of that. That's why I tried using the album's popularity to justify its enjoyability in the first place, which I'm aware would be really, really stupid in any other context. In addition, despite the really simplistic sampling style, there's actually a fair bit of sonic variety. Sure, you're gonna find a lot of pitched-down 80s chill-out, some of which is played straight and kind of outlined like the pop songs that they are, most notably the ever-iconic second track. But there's stuttering loops, there's more experimental-sounding tracks that focus more on their atmosphere than the hook of the songs they're sampling, and awkwardly looping. There are some really atonal and creepy tracks on here, like tracks 5 and 7, and it's actually pretty interesting, even though I tend to like the cleaner sounding tracks like tracks 3 and 6 more. Track 6 in particular, the Echo one, is really immersive and probably my personal favorite on the album. Sure, I'm more inclined to credit the success of this album on the original performers that were sampled rather than Vexrite herself, but I don't know, I've listened to it enough times, and it's not something that particularly crosses my mind anymore. It is what it is, all's fair in love and vaporwave. So overall, do I recommend Floral Shoppe? Well, you probably don't need my recommendation, to be honest. The sheer size and longevity of this phenomenon dictates you're likely to listen to it anyway at some point and make your own judgments. I think in this genre you're more likely to excuse the stuff you know better regardless of artistic integrity, and even though I'm aware that this album probably did not have much of any effort put into it, I'm gonna give it a pass, because it was one of my first vaporwave albums, and something about it, be it the atmosphere or the catchiness of the samples, just keeps me coming back for more. Floral Shoppe may not be the best the genre has to offer, but I think anyone interested in vaporwave absolutely has to listen to it. I'm overall feeling a 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.